Do you like 80s cartoons? If you do, you probably think they were totally awesome.
I'm in love with a hero. I'm in love with the one who will...
Hello fellow geeks of the world, have you heard of the book Totally Awesome, written by Andrew Farago? It's about the greatest cartoons of the 80s. Major shout out to my buddy Aaron, thank you so much for getting me this book. I had forgotten that this just recently came out. This book was published by Inside Editions. It doesn't talk about every single cartoon that came out in the 80s, but it does talk about several very popular ones. For all of those cartoons that Andrew Farago does cover, he does a pretty darn detailed job. I really love the layout for this book, especially the cover art. The image does stretch all the way around, and I think that this is done really cool looking. And oh my god, if you take off the protective cover, it looks like a test screen. Who remembers this? Each chapter talks about a different popular cartoon that came out in the 80s. I used to love the Smurfs. I did know that French artist Peyo, who did a comic strip based on the Smurfs, was the inspiration for the series. However, I had no idea that they were on for basically the entire 80s. Oh my god, the Smurflings, and that's Nat. He was my favorite one out of them. I didn't know that his full name was Natural Smurf. Oh my god, we have Spider-Man and his amazing friends. Of course, we had to have He-Man in the Masters of the Universe, and She-Ra, Princess of Power, too. It's really cool that we have these reproduction of some of the sketches that have been used. Did you know that original conception had Inspector Gadget with a mustache? Oh my god, G.I. Joe! I used to love Zartan. I feel as though his character wasn't really fleshed out enough in the cartoon series, even though the comic book series really went into it, but still, as a cartoon, I was confused about some of the characteristics that he had. Jim! Truly outrageous! We are the Misfits! Look at this! I love the storyboarding art that's included here too, so we can see how certain ideas are just kind of fleshed out. The real Ghostbusters! I was a huge fan of this cartoon series. I know many hardcore fans already know about this, but there was another Ghostbuster cartoon that came out, which is why they put the real Ghostbusters in front of this, just as a little poke to that series. Of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has to be talked about as well. I mean, this was a really long-running series, and I was a huge fan of it myself. Oh my god, look at this. Look at these characters. One of the series being talked about in this book is Mighty Mouse. I honestly didn't know that Mighty Mouse had his own series in the 80s. I thought he only came out like back in the 60s and 70s, but hey, you know what? I'm glad this is included. The last point I'll make about this book is the Disney Afternoon, which really encompasses several different series, but who was excited about coming home after school just so you can watch these series? I used to love the Gummy Bears. That's not the only cartoon being talked about in this chapter. We also have DuckTales, and oh my god, it's Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. This is a very cool book. Highly recommend it to many of you guys out there, especially just for nostalgic purpose, so you can see some of these series and find out some of the insight behind what was going on. I haven't read this book completely cover to cover. I did go through some of the series that are a bit more important to me, like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And although some points are a bit more boring than others, it is interesting to find out some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that we were never aware of. And like I said, not every cartoon is touched on in this book. There are a couple series like Alvin and the Chipmunks that was mentioned several times, but it didn't get its own chapter. I do feel as though every cartoon that he did touch on that got its own chapter were probably the most important, or at least the most popular cartoon series of the 80s. I'm more than likely going to be reading this very thoroughly in the next couple of days. If you're interested in getting it yourself, it's available at just about any bookstore anywhere, or you can go to Amazon and buy it from there. If you're a fan of cartoons from the 80s, or just a fan of cartoons in general, I feel as though you would enjoy this. And with that, let me let you guys go. Thank you guys for watching me in this video. If you haven't done it yet, check out my Patreon site, check out my social media sites, my websites, and everything else out there. Peace, love, namaste, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.
I know I'm safe from the villain's plan.
There are a lot of different cartoons that came out in the 80s that had very short stints, and most of them were based on toys, one of which was Visionaries. Does anyone remember Visionaries? I thought that they were such a cool concept, and I'm surprised they didn't take off more.